This is Art Television.
Coming up, State of Business, sponsored by
Manage all your SLT Mobitel services through the MySLT app.
IWS Aviation.
Good evening and welcome to the State of Business on Art Television. I am Chavika Samarasinghe. Let's have a look at the headlines. Ceylon Electricity Board insists on full cost recovery tariff. Central Bank expands concessions to non-bank sector. News in detail. The World Bank announces that it has no plan to offer new financing to Sri Lanka. The multilateral funder awaits an adequate macroeconomic policy framework for the nation. The World Bank suggests that Sri Lanka needs to follow a number of deep structural reforms. In a statement, the World Bank said that the reforms must focus on economic stabilization, as well as addressing root structural causes that created this crisis, to ensure that Sri Lanka's future recovery and development is resilient and inclusive. Regarding the ongoing crisis, the World Bank Group said it is deeply concerned about the dire economic situation and its impact on the people of Sri Lanka. The World Bank also suggested that Sri Lanka needs to repurpose the available resources under existing loans. The statement stresses that only such a move will assist to help alleviate severe shortages in essential items such as medicines, gas, fertilizer, meals for school children, and cash transfers for poor and vulnerable households. The statement also said about $160 million of these funds have been disbursed to date to meet urgent needs. They have also assured to work and monitor closely with implementing agencies to establish robust controls and fiduciary oversight to ensure these resources reach the poor and vulnerable. Fitch Ratings yesterday warned that lingering political risks challenge Sri Lanka's emergence from default. It said that the new president was confirmed by a large majority in parliament and his government has drawn in opposition members. This gives some hope that it will have sufficient support to negotiate and carry out difficult reforms as part of efforts to restore macroeconomic stability and debt sustainability. Such reforms could unlock funding support from the International Monetary Fund, which is viewed as important for Sri Lanka's emergence from default. The government's parliamentary position appears strong, but public support for the government is weaker. Fitch expects any reform package agreed with the IMF by the government to include elements such as higher taxes, expenditure rationalization, and a commitment to a greater degree of exchange rate flexibility. There is a significant risk that such reforms could cause public opposition that might impede their implementation. It said that in the absence of an IMF deal, Fitch expects Sri Lanka to face a very strained external position in the near term. Debt negotiations could be complicated by debt owed to China. China has traditionally preferred to offer relief for large loans through deferrals such as maturity extensions, payment rescheduling, or grace periods, rather than through write-downs. Fitch maintains that this approach could increase challenges for Sri Lanka to successfully negotiate debt restructuring with other creditors to deliver the debt sustainability sought by the IMF. Fitch rates Sri Lanka's long-term foreign currency issuer default rating at restricted default. The long-term local currency IDR is CCC and is under criteria observation. The CCC rating reflects a high risk that local currency debt will be included in debt restructuring, as the stock and interest costs are large, and omitting it would increase the restructuring burden on holders of foreign currency debt. The central bank has issued new guidelines to non-bank financial institutions, stipulating how they are to provide concessions to borrowers affected by the economic crisis. With non-bank financial institutions being licensed finance companies and specialized leasing companies, concessions are granted to devise suitable repayment arrangements based on the new repayment capacities of the borrower on a case-by-case basis. These concessions are to be issued while preserving the non-bank financial institution sector's stability by preventing any elevated strain on the financial system. Accordingly, the circular is issued to provide broad guidelines with prudential requirements for consistent implementation across all non-bank financial institutions. Non-bank financial institutions may consider implementing these concessions through post-COVID-19 revival units, which have already been established in terms of the letter issued on the 29th of October 2021. These instructions, similar to the ones issued to the banking sector, came as the central bank got overwhelmed by requests for relief from a multitude of sections. Borrowers of non-bank lenders typically consist of subprime borrowers, and they are the first to fall when the economy collapses. The guidelines cover all sectors, including but not limited to tourism, transportation, and macro, small and medium enterprises engaged in manufacturing, services, agriculture, and construction. Accordingly, non-bank lenders were instructed to provide concessions spanning from grace periods for capital, interest, both capital and interest, part of the capital or interest, or to restructure their facilities. Stay tuned. We will return after this commercial break.
Hey Siri. Can our smartphones spy on us?
Interesting question.
Exactly. Which is why we're going to look for answers here on Shift.
Welcome back. The Ceylon Electricity Board yesterday insisted on a full cost recovery tariff hike. The electricity company noted that its accumulated revenue shortfall nears 500 billion rupees. At the stakeholder consultation convened by the Public Utilities Commission of Sri Lanka yesterday, CEB Chief Engineer Tariffs Madhavi Kudaligama asserted that the revenue generated is insufficient and that the financial position is not healthy. According to her, the accumulated revenue shortfall is at 477 billion rupees as of May 2022. The government cannot afford subsidies anymore, and therefore a full cost recovery tariff is inevitable. Last year recorded the highest domestic tariff revenue at 34%, followed by 31% each from industrial and general, 2% from hotels, 1% each from government and street lighting, 0.2% from religious establishments, and 0.1% each from agriculture and electric vehicle charging. Kudaligama maintains that an independent pricing formula is critical for fair play among stakeholders, and that the CEB has a grant payable of 612.4 billion rupees with 170,586 million rupees in liabilities to creditors. Major creditors include Ceylon Petroleum Corporation, individual power plants, non-conventional renewable energy, and Sojitz Kalanithissa. Short-term payables include coal purchases, local suppliers and contractors, LC and TT payments, rooftop solar payments, and project loans, she explained. She underscored that the CEB's financial sustainability was imperative for the overall economy. Meanwhile, during the consultation, stakeholders called on the government to consider the decision to hike electricity tariffs. Over 60 participants took part in the sessions to share their views and proposals. The majority pointed out that a tariff hike cannot be justified at this moment, though the cost reflecting utility structure is critical. They asserted that people face multiple challenges and a skyrocketing cost of living. Stakeholders pointed to bloated staff, benefits, and inefficiency and waste within the Ceylon Electricity Board and recommended that measures be taken to cut costs by addressing these issues. Norwegian offshore wind service company Edda Wind has agreed with Colombo Dockyard PLC to terminate construction and delivery contracts for 2 commissioning support operation vessels. The terms and conditions of the cancellation have not been disclosed. However, it is seen as a consequence of the economic crisis. The hydrogen-ready commissioning support operations vessels were scheduled to be delivered under the Norwegian flag in January 2024 and July 2024. Edda Wind shared that it did not pay any pre-delivery installments to Colombo Dockyard and only incurred minor costs in relation to the project. However, under the agreement, it will receive compensation which will give a modest positive profit and loss effect. Edawind's growth ambitions remain unchanged, and the company is evaluating alternatives for future fleet expansion. Meanwhile, Sri Lankan Airlines' payment of $6.125 million in interest on its government-guaranteed $175 million unsecured notes within the 30-day grace period has no impact on the bond's long-term rating of C, Fitch Ratings said yesterday. Sri Lankan Airlines this week said that it paid the coupon payment on its $175 million bond, though it did not share the size of the interest payment. Fitch maintains that the notes, due in 2024, remain in breach of two specific events of default tied to the guarantor, the government of Sri Lanka, as governed by the note's trust deed. The events are the government's 12th April 2022 announcement of a moratorium on the payment of principal and interest on its external debt, and the government's default on the payment of interest on its external debt exceeding $25 million in April 2022, along with the expiry of the associated grace period in May 2022. In addition, Fitch views the debt moratorium overhang as a continuation of the default-like process for affected obligators. President Ranil Wickremesinghe, issuing an extraordinary Gazette notification last night, has prorogued Parliament with effect from midnight yesterday. The President has fixed for Parliament to commence its next session on the 3rd of August. Former President and Sri Lankan Freedom Party Chairman Maithripala Sirisena said forming an all-party government is imperative to save the country from its current crisis. Sirisena and several members of the SLFP met with President Ranil Wickremesinghe yesterday at the Ministry of Finance to discuss the possibility of setting up an all-party government. According to Sirisena, the SLFP will present its own proposals, and any future program will be implemented according to the President's response. Meanwhile, Malwatha Chapter Senior Sangha member Venerable Dorane Ganga Ratnapala Nayaka Thero says a snap election is more suitable at this juncture due to the current situation in the country. The Thero maintained that the current parliament is a distortion, as the same people have been reappointed with no visible change in the system. The Thero made these comments when Election Commission Chairman, Attorney at Law Nimal Punchiheva, along with several officials of the Commission, called on the Mahanayaka Theros of the Askeri and Malwatha chapters. Before the meeting, Punchiheva presented a proposal for electoral reforms before the Theros and explained its contents to them. Stay tuned for stock updates.
Manage all your SLT Mobitel services through the MySLT app.
Trading at the Colombo Stock Exchange ended on positive notes today. The all-share price index gained 51.51 points to close at 7,731.15, and the S&P SL20 gained 16.25 points to close at 2,446.13. The turnover was 1.5 billion rupees and over 65 million shares were traded. Up next are forex rates. That's all our news for today. Take care and good night.
State of Business was sponsored by
Manage all your SLT Mobitel services through the MySLT app.
Star, see that out.